The Archangel Chronicles 3, Chapter 3, Voices in the Wilderness, by Raymond Colladi, copyright 2026, all rights reserved.
By my road, a silent shore, where reeds bent in the dawn, old Mary lay with fading breath, her earthly journey gone. She took the land of Brigomarus, the soldiers scarred by years, and blessed the soul she taught to heal through prayer instead of spears.
Go where the desert prophet calls, the voice beside the stream.
The Lord has not forgotten you.
You've only found a dream. Hear the voices in the wilderness, calling through the sand. Lay your burden at the river, place your life in heaven's hands. Though the road is long and lonely, though your heart is torn apart, God can raise a broken warrior and make a shepherd of his heart. He crossed the roads of Egypt and beneath the blazing sky, past Gaza's gates and Ascalon, sweet balsam standing high. At night beneath the countless stars, old memory would arise. The cries of Bethlehem returned before his weary eyes. He whispered to the silent heavens, who am I today? Alone would answer him as darkness filled the bay. Hear the voices in the wilderness, crawling through the sand. Lay your burden at the river, place your life in heaven's hands. Though the road is long and lonely, though your heart is torn apart, God can raise a broken warrior and make the shepherd of his heart. He dreamed a song of long ago, before a world was made. A shining messenger of light stood where the shadows played. Oh, little one, don't be afraid, the stars don't know your name. Within your soul creation sings the Lord's eternal flame. He woke before the morning broke, toward Judea's land, where stolen wind and silence met, and God walked through the sand. Beside the Jordan stood a man clothed rough as desert stone. His words cut deeper than the sword Brigomarus had known. Oh, you've laid aside the blade, he said, but laid yourself down yet. The old man stepped into the stream, his face with tears was wet. Beneath the water died the past, above it rose anew. The river washed not blood away, but taught his soul what's true. Hear the voices in the wilderness, calling through the sight. Every soul is summoned home by God's redeeming hand. Leave behind the chain of yesterday, let mercy be your guide. For the King is drawing nearer, and whose river runs inside. So if you hear the desert wind across the evening sky, remember every broken heart can learn again to fly. For somewhere by the Jordan still the ancient echoes start. Lay down all that you have been and let God shape your heart.
Night had settled softly over the community by Lake Mariotis. The wind from the reeds whispered against the mud brick walls, carrying the scent of water and myrrh. Lamps glowed dimly in the courtyards of the Therapeutae, and from the prayer hall came the low murmur of psalms sung by weary voices awaiting the dawn watch. Brigomarus knelt alone beside the sycamore tree near the outer wall, The former captain of Herod's Gallic guards scarcely resembled the man who had once ridden beneath scarlet standards with spear and sword. His hair, once a mass of fiery red curls, had grown long and streaked with gray. The heavy muscles of the soldier remained, but were softened into the quiet strength of labor and fasting. The scars upon his arms and neck were still visible, yet his hands now smelled more often of olive wood and bread than leather and iron. Before him lay the simple staff he carried as a servant of the community. A novice approached silently and bowed. "Brother Brigomarus," he whispered, "Mother Mara asks for you." Brigomarus rose at once. His chest tightened. For 7 days, Mara ben Hannaniah had not left her chamber. The old woman who had gathered wanderers, widows, exiles, slaves, and broken souls into the shelter of her fellowship now lay near death. The physicians could do nothing. The sisters had ceased speaking of recovery. Now they spoke only of peace. Brigomarus entered quietly. The chamber smelled of oil and cedar smoke. Lamps flickered against the whitewashed walls. Several women sat in prayer nearby, their eyes wet with silent grief. Mara lay upon a woven couch beneath a linen covering. Time had reduced her almost to frailty itself. Her once piercing eyes were clouded with age, and yet, when she saw Brigomarus enter, warmth stirred within them like embers beneath ash. "You came," she whispered. He knelt beside her immediately and bowed his head. "Mother," he said softly. She smiled faintly at the title. She had allowed no one to call her master, for she was only a servant, only a sister. Brigomarus took her hand carefully in both of his enormous scarred palms. For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, somewhere in the darkness, night birds called over the marshes. "At dawn," Mara said weakly, "I dreamt again." Brigomarus listened. In the desert, there was a voice crying beside the Jordan. A flame among stones, a man clothed in roughness, fierce as Elijah. She breathed slowly, painfully. The Spirit pressed it upon me. "You must go to him." Brigomarus frowned slightly. "Who is he?" "They call him John." The name lingered strangely in the room. Mara's fingers tightened weakly around his hand. "You were not ransomed from blood and violence, merely to hide here forever, my son." Brigomarus lowered his eyes. "I have found peace here." "Yes," Mara whispered, "but peace is not sleep." Her breathing faltered. "You came to us carrying death in your soul. You obeyed. You fasted. You learned mercy. The Lord has healed much within you, but healing is not the end of a man's calling." Brigomarus looked toward the floor. "I fear the world beyond these walls." "Good," said Mara with surprising sharpness. "Then perhaps you will not become what you once were." Silence returned. The old woman's gaze drifted toward the ceiling beams. "When I first found you in the desert, you only wished to die." Brigomarus said nothing. "And now," she whispered, "you are afraid to live." Those words struck deeper than any spear. He clenched his jaw with determination. For years he had buried the memory of Bethlehem beneath prayer and obedience. Even now, in dreams, he still saw the mothers screaming beneath torchlight. He still heard infants crying. He still saw the blood upon long sword blades. Mara seemed to read the torment within him. The Holy One is not finished with you. Tears welled suddenly in Brigomarus's eyes, though he fought them fiercely. I am no prophet, he said hoarsely, no righteous man. I was a butcher in Herod's service. And Moses killed a man, Mara replied faintly. David sent one to his death. Elijah called down fire. Yet the Lord uses cracked vessels because unbroken ones do not yet know mercy. Her breathing grew weaker. Go to the desert. Find this John. Listen. Brigomarus touched his forehead to her hand. If you command it, I will go. Mara smiled. No, not command. Her voice was barely audible now. Blessing. Slowly, trembling with effort, she lifted her frail hand and placed it upon his brow. May the Eternal guide your feet beyond fear. May he strip pride from you as wind strips leaves from cedar. May he touch your hands to protect rather than destroy. And when the Anointed One comes, may your eyes behold him. At those words, a stiffness seemed to enter the chamber. The women nearby lowered their heads in prayer. Brigomarus closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Mara's hand had fallen gently to her chest. Her breathing had ceased. No one moved. Mara's attendants began quietly weeping. Brigomarus remained kneeling beside the couch long after the others had covered Mara's body in linen. The dawn bells sounded hours later through the reeds. They buried Mara ben Hannaniah at sunset, beside the water she had loved. There was no monument, only prayers, psalms, and tears. The brothers and sisters stood in white robes beneath the reddening sky, while the wind bent the tall grasses around the grave. Brigomarus helped lower her into the earth. For a moment his great hands lingered upon the ropes. Then it was done. That night he kept vigil alone beside the tomb. At dawn, before the others awoke, he gathered the few possessions he owned: a waterskin, a travel cloak, a knife for bread, the worn scroll of psalms Mara had once copied for him, and his staff. Nothing more. He paused at the edge of the settlement as the eastern horizon began to glow pale gold. The lake shimmered softly behind him. Ahead lay wilderness, the Sinai desert, and beyond that the Judean desert, the Jordan. And somewhere beyond the burning hills, a voice crying out beneath the heavens. Brigomarus drew a long breath. Then the former strategos of Herod's guard turned his face toward the wilderness and began to walk. For many days he walked beneath the hard blue skies of the empire. He followed the ancient coastal road northward from Egypt, the great artery by which Rome stitched together its dominions with stone, trade, and iron. Caravans groaned past him beneath loads of grain and dyed cloth. Roman couriers thundered by on sweating horses. Merchants from Cyprus, Nabatea, and Syria argued in a dozen tongues beneath roadside awnings. Yet Brigomarus remained apart from them all. He carried no weapon openly now, only a traveler's staff and a small bundle slung across one shoulder. Few who passed him guessed that the broad-shouldered wanderer with weathered eyes, had once commanded an army beneath Herod's banners. The sea remained on his left hand for much of the journey. Sometimes it lay calm as polished bronze beneath the sun. Sometimes gray winds churned it into white fury against the rocks. Gulls wheeled endlessly overhead, crying like lost souls over the surf. At night, he avoided the inns and settlements where too many memories lived and men gathered. Instead, he climbed the dunes beyond the road or sought hollows among rocky hills where the thorn bushes bent against the wind. There, he lit small fires scarcely brighter than the embers and sat alone beneath the wheeling stars. The silence of Mara's fellowship still clung to him. Often he found himself listening instinctively for the dawn hymns of the Therapeutae, only to remember with a hollow ache that he would never hear his mentor Mara's voice again. On the seventh night, he camped upon a rise overlooking the sea. The moon cast silver across the waters, and the road below gleamed pale between dark stretches of earth. Far away, he could see torchlight moving like fireflies, where a caravan still traveled after dusk. Brigomarus sat cross-legged beneath the dying fire, his great hands resting motionless upon his knees. Once those hands had killed without hesitation. The thought came unbidden, as it always did. Bethlehem. The name itself had become a wound. He saw again the narrow streets, slick with blood, heard women screaming in the night while his soldiers kicked open doors, saw himself riding beneath Herod's orders, armored and terrible, while mothers clutched infants against their breasts. For years he had begged the Eternal to erase those memories, but now wondered if remembrance itself was the punishment meant to keep his soul awake. He lifted his eyes toward the stars. How strange, he thought, that the heavens remained so beautiful above a world capable of such cruelty. The same stars had once guided kings and wanderers toward a child in Bethlehem. He remembered Gondophares, Balthazar, and Melchior, the strange fellowship of the star-bearers, and the child whose presence had silenced even hardened warriors. Was that child truly the anointed one? Brigomarus did not know, and yet Mara had believed, and because she had believed, so too did some small part of that rub off on him. The wind shifted off the sea, cool and salted. He closed his eyes. "Who am I now?" he whispered aloud into the darkness. No answer came, only the waves. The days passed beneath dust and sunlight. He crossed into the lands around Gaza, where the desert and the sea seemed forever at war. Roman watchtowers overlooked the roads. Palm groves shimmered in the heat. Nabatean traders moved in long camel trains, heavy with incense and myrrh from Arabia. Gaza itself he avoided. He skirted its crowded outskirts and continued northward along the coast. Near Ascalon, the air changed. The scent met him first upon the wind, sweet, sharp, almost medicinal, the balsam groves. He paused upon a hillside overlooking them. Rows of low trees stretched across the earth in careful cultivation, their resin gathered like treasure for kings and emperors. Workers moved among them beneath the supervision of armed guards, for the balsam of Ascalon was worth more than silver in distant cities. Brigomarus stood watching silently. How strange the empire was. Men killed for gold, killed for land, killed for crowns, and here men guarded sap bleeding from trees as though it were sacred. He walked on. That night he camped inland among broken hills scattered with scrub and stone. No fire this time, only the stars above him like cold lamps in the heaven. Sleep came poorly, dreams haunted him. He dreamt he was a child of tender years, dressed in a pure white gown. He looked up to the clear blue sky. A radiant figure, neither man nor woman, was hovering above him. This being was incredibly beautiful, translucent, its face shimmering, and it was singing a lullaby to him, like no song that had ever been sung to him so tenderly. "Oh, little one, don't be afraid. You were known before the worlds were made. The stars still echo in your soul, a living spark from long ago. And all creation sings along. Inside your heart there is a song. Oh, little one, your life belongs to the great symphony of God." Then he saw Mara standing beside still waters at dawn, her white robes stirring in the reeds. She looked at him. "Go to the desert. Find the voice." Then the dream shifted. A river beneath blazing sunlight, crowds gathering upon its banks, a wild-eyed man crying out beneath the sky like one of the ancient prophets returned from the dead. Brigomarus awoke before dawn with his heart pounding. The wilderness around him was utterly silent. For a long time he remained seated, staring eastward. The horizon slowly began to pale, and there, beyond the coastal plains and distant hills, lay Judea, the land of prophets, the land of kings, the land where a Holy One had touched the world. He rose without a word and continued walking. Gradually, the softness of the sea vanished behind him. The earth became harsher. Green faded into ochre and stone. Villages grew sparse. The wind carried dust instead of salt. Dry ravines cut through barren hills like wounds in the land itself. The road narrowed into rough tracks, used more by shepherds and pilgrims than merchants. By the time Brigomarus reached the edges of the Judean wilderness, civilization itself seemed to have fallen away behind him. Before him stretched an immense desolation of rock and silence. Jagged ridges burned beneath the sun. The valleys below lay pale and empty as ancient bones. Caves gaped in the cliffs where hermits and madmen might dwell unseen. Yet there was something terrible and holy in the wilderness too. The desert stripped away illusion. No palaces existed here, no banners, no glory, no crowds to applaud violence, only stone, wind, sky, and God. Brigomarus stood upon a ridge overlooking the wasteland while the evening sun bled across the desert hills. For the first time since Mara's death, he felt something within him grow still. Not peace, at least not yet, but readiness. Somewhere beyond those barren ridges flowed the Jordan River, and somewhere beside it cried the man called John. Brigomarus wandered along the road until it simply stopped pretending to be a road. Stone replaced dust, wind replaced voices, the sky widened until it seemed less a roof than an abyss turned upward. Brigomarus walked into it without a hurry, his staff striking a steady rhythm against the ground. Once, long ago, men had followed the sound of his steps into battle. Now it marked only the passing of an older man who had outlived his former name. The river found him before he saw it. A murmur at first, like memory returning, and then a gathering of sound, water over stone, voices layered upon it, rising and falling like a restless tide. He paused on a ridge and looked down. They had come in numbers. Men in rough cloaks, women with veiled faces, children clutching at hems, soldiers too, with their hands hung uncertainly at their sides, as if unsure what to do, without a hilt to rest upon. They gathered along the banks of the Jordan, pressed close as though something there might answer what they had carried too long. At the water's edge stood a man. No platform, no standard, no mark of rank. His garment was coarse, his hair unbound, his frame lean as if carved by the same wind that shaped the land. Yet when he spoke, the wilderness itself seemed to listen. "Turn!" The word did not shout, it struck. "Turn from what you have made of yourselves. The axe is ready, already laid at the root. Do not say we have come far enough. The fire does not measure distance. It measures truth." A man stepped forward and waded into the river. The wild one, John, Brigomarus heard someone whisper, took him by the shoulders, lowered him beneath the water, and raised him again. No ritual gesture softened it. It was an act like breaking ground. Brigomarus descended the ridge. He did not press forward. He did not seek a place. He stood where the stones were scattered and the dust held the memory of many feet. He had stood in crowds before, on sand slick with blood, in courts where men bartered lives with nod, but it was not like that. No one looked at him. No one feared him. It was a strange anonymity, almost a relief. John's voice carried again. "Do not say, we have already turned. The fire refines what has already been offered." Brigomarus felt the words like a hand upon a bruise long healed. So he had thought. He shifted his weight, the old instinct stirring. Measure the voice, judge the man, decide whether to stay or go. He stayed. John fell silent. It was not a pause, but a turning. The prophet's head lifted, and his gaze moved across the crowd with a precision that was almost physical, as if he were separating grain from chaff with his eyes alone. It came to rest on Brigomarus. The distance between them did not lessen, yet it felt as though the space had been stripped away. "You," John said. No name, no title. Brigomarus did not move. John stepped once into the shallows, water darkening the hem of his garment. "You learn to lay down the sword," he said, not loudly. "But have you laid down the man who held it?" Something in Brigomarus tightened, old muscles remembering command, resistance rising like a reflex. For a heartbeat, he saw again the arc of a blade, the collapse of a body, the red haze that once answered every question. He swallowed. "I have lived in peace," he said, his voice steady, worn smooth by years of restraint. "I have done no violence." John's answer came without delay. "Peace is not the absence of violence. It is the absence of self." The words resonated. Brigomarus felt it, an inward shift, subtle and undeniable. He had known accusation. He had borne it in a silence, carried it through the years that wore it down to something like dust. This was different. This was not naming what he had done, but was calling forth what remained. "I was received," Brigomarus said after a moment. "I was taught. I served. I kept watch. I did not return to what I was." Images came unbidden. Mara's hands, thin and sure, guiding the work of the day, the low murmur of prayers at dawn, the quiet rhythm of labor that asked nothing and gave nothing. Years laid one upon another until they seemed a single long breath. John listened, his face unreadable. "You buried your past," he said at last, "but you did not yet give your future." Brigomarus looked down at his hands. They were not the hands of the arena now. The scars remained, pale lines across the knuckles and the back, but the grip had changed. They had shaped wood, carried water, lifted the fallen without striking. They had learned gentleness, and yet... "Then why was I given peace," he said quietly, "if it was not the end?" John's gaze did not waver. "Because peace was never the end," he said. "It was preparation." The river moved beside them, indifferent and constant. A man cried out as he was lowered beneath the water. A child laughed somewhere behind the crowd. The world did not pause for this moment, and yet, for Brigomarus, it gathered into a single point of decision. He had come into the wilderness because something in him had not been satisfied with stillness. He had named it grief or loss. He had not named it for what it was, a call to something higher. He took a step forward. The stones shifted underfoot. The bank fell away to the shallow edge, and the water touched his toes, cool, immediate, without ceremony. He did not look back. There was nothing behind him to return to, only what had prepared him to stand here. He waded in. The current pressed against his legs, not strong but insistent. It was not like the baths of the community, nor the careful washing of a life kept in order. This was movement, living, uncontained. He came within reach of John. For a moment they stood, face to face, the older warrior and the wilderness prophet, the years between them measured not in age, but in fire. "What do you seek?" John asked. Brigomarus did not answer at once. He searched himself, not for the right word, but for the true one. The old answers came first. Absolution, rest, forgetfulness. He let them pass. At last he said, "To be given." John nodded, as if the answer had been expected all along. He placed his hands on Brigomarus' shoulders. They were rough, strong, unhesitating. "Then be given," he said. The water closed over Brigomarus' head. Sound vanished, for a heartbeat or two at most. There was nothing but pressure, darkness, the muffled echo of a life that had been lived in fragments, sand and blood, fear and fire, the long quiet of years that had softened without completing. Then the pressures released and he rose. Air struck his lungs like something new. The sky seemed wider, the light sharper, as if the world had not changed, and yet everything in it had been clarified. John's hands left him. "You have learned to live without the sword," the prophet said. "Now learn to stand without the past." Brigomarus stood in the water a moment longer. The river of life moved around him, indifferent to what had just occurred, carrying on toward a sea it did not question. He stepped back to the bank, the weight of his garments settling, the chill of the water giving way to warmth of the sun. No one marked him, and no voice proclaimed him changed. He did not seek either. He moved through the edge of the crowd and came again to the stones where he had first stood. For a time he listened, truly listened, to the voice that still called others into the water, into the fire that did not consume but revealed. Then he turned. The wilderness lay open before him, the same as it had been when he entered it. Stone, wind, sky. but he was not the same man who had walked in. He did not carry peace now as something to be kept, but as something to be spent. Brigomarus took up his staff and stepped forward. He had found his place. Brigomarus remained. The days became ordered, not by Rome's reckoning, or by the changing of watches, but by the rhythm of the river and the voice in the wilderness. Dawn came pale over the eastern ridges, and already the crowds would be gathered beside the Jordan, shepherds smelling of dust and wool, widows wrapped in worn shawls, tax collectors hiding uneasily beneath expensive cloaks, zealots with hard eyes, fishermen from Galilee, pilgrims from Jerusalem, and even Roman auxiliaries standing uncertainly at the edge of the multitude as though ashamed to be there. And always John stood among them like a flame burning in dry grass. Brigomarus watched men enter the water trembling and emerge weeping. He saw husbands kneel before wives they had wronged. He saw brothers embrace after years of hatred. He saw soldiers loosen their grip upon violence and merchants return silver gained through deceit. Some came proud and departed angry, offended by the prophet's words. Others arrived hollow and broken and departed carrying something like light within them. Brigomarus helped where he could. At first, he did so almost instinctively, as a soldier might maintain order within a camp. He guided the elderly down dangerous slopes to the riverbank. He carried water skins for the weak. He restrained quarrels before they became violent. When the crowds swelled too tightly around John, it was often Brigomarus's towering frame that quietly created space enough for the prophet to move. But gradually, his service became something gentler. He learned to recognize despair in a man's eyes before the man himself spoke. He sat beside the sick, beneath rough shelters of cloth, and listened to their fears through the long heat of the afternoon. He guided the blind toward the water. Once he carried a crippled child nearly 2 miles upon his shoulders because the boy's mother could go no further. And sometimes strange things happened. A woman fevered nearly unto death recovered after John prayed over her beside the river. A man long tormented in mind fell weeping to the ground during baptism and afterwards seemed entirely changed, speaking softly and clearly as though awakening from years of darkness. Brigomarus himself once witnessed John place his hands upon the clouded eyes of an old shepherd who afterwards stared toward the distant hills in stunned silence and whispered, "I can see the light again." Brigomarus did not know what to make of such things, yet he could not deny what he witnessed. The wilderness itself seemed alive now, not tame, not safe, but expectant. The very air felt charged, as though history itself waited upon the edge of some unseen threshold. And within Brigomarus, something long frozen slowly thawed. Days became weeks. For the first time since his youth, he no longer woke each dawn crushed beneath the weight of memory. Bethlehem had not vanished from him, nor the faces of the dead, but they no longer defined the entirety of his soul. Service had become stronger than shame. John came to trust him without ever saying so openly. When hostile Pharisees arrived from Jerusalem with questions sharpened like knives, Brigomarus stood nearby in silence. When crowds threatened to overwhelm the narrow banks, John merely glanced once toward him, and Brigomarus understood immediately what was needed. Others among the followers began quietly seeking his counsel, drawn perhaps by the strange contradiction he embodied, a man of immense strength who no longer desired power. And Brigomarus himself, listened constantly to John. The prophet spoke little of comfort. His words burned too fiercely for that. He spoke of repentance as though it were breaking chains. He spoke of justice not as law, but as mercy lived without hypocrisy. He rebuked corruption openly, whether in peasants or priests. Yet beneath the severity, there existed something else, longing, a fierce expectation. "The kingdom approaches," John would say, staring into the wilderness as though he already saw it advancing. "Prepare yourselves." One evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the desert cooled beneath the coming night, Brigomarus sat beside a small fire near the riverbank. Above them the heavens blazed with innumerable stars. The Jordan whispered softly through the reeds. Far off, jackals called among the hills. John sat opposite him upon a flat stone, eating coarse bread in silence. For a long time, neither spoke. Brigomarus had grown accustomed to such silences. Unlike courts or barracks, no men were hurried to fill the emptiness with noise. At last, he said quietly, "How did this begin for you?" John looked toward the river. Firelight flickered across the sharp planes of his face. "With silence," he answered. Brigomarus waited. "I went into the wilderness when I was still young, before the crowds, before the river." He tore another piece of bread absently between rough fingers. "I thought I sought God. In truth, God stripped away everything else first." "The desert did that to me as well," Brigomarus murmured. John nodded faintly. "The wilderness unmakes false things." The fire burned low beneath the wilderness stars. Beyond its trembling light stretched the dark hills above the Jordan, barren and silent beneath the moon. John sat with his hands resting upon his knees, the firelight flickering across the severe lines of his face. "You speak as one who has walked alone a long time," Brigomarus said quietly. John gave a faint nod. "I have." The wind stirred softly through the reeds below. "My father, Zechariah, was a priest of the temple," he paused. "Before my birth, a messenger appeared to my father within the sanctuary itself." Brigomarus listened intently. "He declared that I would be filled with the Spirit from my mother's womb, that I would prepare the people for the coming of the Lord, that I would walk in the spirit and power of Elijah." "Elijah," Brigomarus murmured. "The prophet of the wilderness." John's eyes reflected the fire. "Yes." For a moment he fell silent. "My parents were old when I was born. They died while I was still young. Afterward, I found little comfort among men." "The priesthood?" Brigomarus asked. John's jaw tightened slightly. "The temple spoke often of holiness," he said. "Yet many who served there were hungering more for influence than truth. I saw men recite sacred words while their hearts remained untouched." Brigomarus grunted softly. "Rome infects all things." "No," John replied quietly. "The corruption begins long before Rome." The flames crackled between them. "So I left the towns behind and wandered east into the wilderness." John lifted his gaze toward the dark ridges beyond the fire. "For many months I lived alone among the ravines and caves. I survived on roots, wild honey, locusts, whatever the desert offered." A faint smile crossed his face. "The wilderness strips a man bare. There he learns how little he truly needs." Brigomarus nodded slowly. He understood this well. "One winter," John continued, "I came upon a settlement near the Dead Sea, hidden among the cliffs and stone valleys. His voice lowered slightly. The followers of the desert covenant. The Essenes, Brigomarus said. John nodded. They called themselves the Sons of Light. The wind hissed softly over the sand. For a time, I lived among them. Brigomarus leaned forward slightly. I've heard of them. What are they like? John stirred the fire with a stick before answering. Disciplined, ordered, silent. He paused. They believed in Jerusalem that had become defiled, that the priesthood had lost its way, so they withdrew from the world to prepare themselves for the coming judgment of God. He looked into the flames as though seeing those distant years. Their days were governed by prayer, study, labor, and purification. Before dawn, they rose in silence to greet the first light. No man spoke idle words before offering thanksgiving to the Creator. A faint memory softened his features. They copied sacred scrolls with immense care, every letter written as though heaven itself watched the movement of the reed. And they shared all things? Brigomarus asked. Yes, no man among them possessed wealth above another. Meals were taken together in ritual purity. Even eating bread was treated as sacred. Brigomarus considered this. Mara's followers were similar. John nodded. There are many in Israel who hunger for holiness. The fire spat sparks upward into the darkness. But what marked them most, John said slowly, was water. Brigomarus looked up. The ablutions? Yes. John's voice deepened slightly, becoming reflective. Throughout the settlement were pools cut deep into the stone, cold water fed by channels from the rare desert rains. He paused. Again and again they immersed themselves. For cleansing? For purification of body and soul. John looked toward the Jordan Valley below. Before prayer, before meals, after labor, before the copying of Scripture, water became a sign of separation from corruption. Brigomarus frowned thoughtfully. Did they believe water itself made them holy? No, John shook his head firmly. The wiser among them understood otherwise. The water was only an outward sign. A man may descend into 100 pools and rise unchanged if his heart remains hard. The Gallic warrior gave a low nod. That is true. John continued. Yet there was power in the act. To step into the water beneath the open sky, to feel the dust and sweat washed away, it reminded men that they stood always in need of cleansing before God. For a long while, only the fire spoke. At first, John admitted quietly, I thought I had found where I belonged. But you left. John's expression drew distant. Yes. Why? The prophet stared into the darkness beyond the flames. Because the wilderness itself became my teacher, the wind moved again across the hills. The Essenes sought separation from the world. They waited for God to act. His eyes narrowed slightly. But the voice growing within me would not allow me to remain hidden behind stone walls. God must come to us from within, not from outside us. Brigomarus watched him carefully. What did the voice say? John looked toward the Jordan. That the people must be called now. The fire crackled sharply. Not only the pure, not only the disciplined, everybody. His voice strengthened. Soldiers, tax collectors, prostitutes, fishermen, priests, the broken and the proud alike. And the water? Brigomarus asked quietly. John's gaze turned toward the river, glimmering faintly in the moonlight below. Their washings prepared me to understand something greater. He pointed towards the Jordan. A man does not need endless rituals. His voice became like distant thunder. He needs repentance, a turning of the heart. The flames danced across his face. So I left Qumran and came to the river. Brigomarus looked at him silently. And there, John said softly, the wilderness finally gave me my purpose. John looked at Brigomarus and smiled. Come, he said, we must rest now for tomorrow. There will be a great revelation. And after that, we must make our way to Machaerus. Brigomarus felt his stomach tightening. He had many memories of that fortress, and one of many places where he had served so long in the elder Herod's army. Why do we go there, teacher? What good can come of it? John looked at Brigomarus, fire in his eye. We go there to play our part in the great mystery, was all he said.
By my road, a silent shore, where reeds bent in the dawn. Old Mary lay with fading breath, her earthly journey gone. She took the land of Brigomarus, the soldiers scarred by years, and blessed the soul she taught to heal through prayer instead of spears.
Go where the desert prophet calls, the voice beside the stream.
The Lord has not forgotten you.
You've only found a dream. Hear the voices in the wilderness calling through the sand. Lay your burden at the river, place your life in heaven's hands. Though the road is long and lonely, though your heart is torn apart, God can raise a broken warrior and make a shepherd of his heart.
Music for Chapter 3. Lay Your Burden by the River, words by Raymond Collotti. Music and voices by Marika A.I. Mara's Death by Raymond Collotti, music by Marika A.I. Journey to the Jordan by Raymond Collotti, music by Marika A.I. In the Desert by Raymond Collotti, music by Marika A.I. From Epidemic Sound, Event Horizon by Ashrey Harishankan. Unsettling Mystery by Anna Deegan. Celestial Breath by Palace on Wheels. Kyrie Eleison by Silver Maple. Archangel Chronicles 3, Chapter 3, Voices in the Wilderness, copyright 2026 by Raymond Collotti, all rights reserved.
He dreamed a song of long ago, before a world was made. A shining messenger of light stood where the shadows played. Oh, little one, don't be afraid, the stars still know your name. Within your soul creation sings the Lord's eternal flame. He woke before the morning broke, entered toward Judea's land, where stone and wind and silence met, and God walked through the sand. Beside the Jordan stood a man clothed rough as desert stone. His words cut deeper than the sword Brigomarus had known. Oh, you've laid aside the blade, he said, but laid yourself down yet. The old man stepped into the stream, his face with tears was wet. Beneath the water that the past above it rose anew. The river washed not blood away, but taught his soul what's true.